Their paws sank silently into the snow, leaving trails that vanished in the storm. Golden eyes glowed against the firelight, sharp yet full of something unspoken. Collars clung to their necks, worn leather hiding secrets time refused to erase. They circled the hearth, not as hunters, but as guardians of a promise. Every movement spoke of memory. Every breath carried the weight of the past. They were wild, yet bound by something stronger than instinct. And within the silence of the mountains, their story was just beginning. Stay with us, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable animal stories. The storm that night rolled down the mountains like a living beast, shaking the pines and rattling the shutters of every lonely cabin in the valley. Snow fell sideways, a white curtain that erased the sky, burying the dirt roads and muffling the world into silence. Deep inside that storm, Daniel stood in the doorway of his old wooden cabin, the lantern light flickering against his worn face. His coat was soaked through, his breath turning to fog in the freezing air. But he wasn't alone. On either side of him padded two bobcats, Ash and Willow. Their paws sank into the snow, their fur clumped with ice, their eyes burning gold even in the storm's fury. They moved close to Daniel, brushing against his legs, almost as if they were guarding him. To anyone else, the sight would have been unbelievable. Two wild predators at ease with a man. But to Daniel, their return felt like both a miracle and a burden. These weren't just animals. They were the last living pieces of Mason, the only friend Daniel had ever trusted. When he pushed the cabin door open, the warmth hit like a memory. Inside, the air smelled of wood smoke and strong coffee, the red glow of the stove fighting against the storm's howl. Ash leapt onto the rug in front of the hearth, stretching long and low, as if he had never left. Willow circled twice, then curled beside the stove, her body pressed tight against Daniel's boots. Watching them settle so naturally, Daniel's heart clenched. It was as if they had come home, not to Mason, who was gone, but to him. Claire followed a step behind, brushing snow from her jacket, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She froze at the sight before her. Two wild cats, so calm, so gentle, lying like house pets at Daniel's feet. Her throat tightened, tears welling in her eyes. She had seen them restless in the shelter for weeks, pacing endlessly as if searching for something they couldn't name. And now, here they were, calm for the first time. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "They chose you, Daniel." Daniel shook his head, his voice rough from disuse. "No, Claire. Mason chose me. Long before he was gone, he made sure of it." His hand trembled as he reached down, brushing against the leather collar around Ash's neck. The surface was cracked, worn smooth in places where Mason's fingers had pressed for years. Etched into the leather was a name, Daniel's. Mason had carved it with his own hands, leaving behind a promise that no storm could wash away. The weight of that act pressed heavy on Daniel's shoulders. He had tried to hide from it, from the responsibility, from the world. He had built walls of silence around himself after Mason's death. But Ash and Willow had broken through them, carrying with them a trust Daniel wasn't sure he could bear. The cabin fell into silence. Only the stove hissed, the fire cracked, and the bobcats' deep, steady breaths filled the room. For the first time since Mason's passing, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. Outside, the storm raged harder, swallowing the mountains whole. Inside, in the fragile glow of firelight, three lives, man and beast, were drawn together again, bound by the carved leather of a collar and the memory of a man who had known them all better than they knew themselves. The storm outside beat against the cabin walls, but Daniel hardly heard it. His gaze stayed locked on the collars resting in his hands. The leather was cracked, stiff from years of wear, and carried the faint scent of pine and smoke, a memory of Mason's long nights carving by lamplight. Daniel traced the letters with his thumb, his own name, cut deep into the hide. Mason hadn't left this choice open. He had carved it into permanence, making Daniel part of the Bobcat story long before either of them could understand why. Claire sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, steam rising to blur her tear-reddened face. She watched him struggle, the silence heavy. Finally, she whispered, "Mason trusted you with them. He wanted you to carry what he couldn't anymore." Daniel clenched his jaw. His shoulders were stiff, as though holding a weight no one else could see. "Trust is heavy," he muttered, his voice rough. He turned the collar over again, the firelight flickering across the faint grooves. It feels like he left me with more than I can hold. Claire leaned forward, her voice steadier now. Sometimes heavy is what keeps a man steady. Mason knew that. He saw it in you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the crackle of the fire filled the space. Mingling with the soft breaths of ash and willow as they curled closer, their bodies pressed against Daniel's legs. He looked down at them, their golden eyes half-lidded, their trust absolute. It struck him then that this was more than an inheritance. It was a covenant carved in leather, written not on paper but on living hearts. Mason hadn't trusted the county, the laws, or even blood relatives. He had trusted Daniel, the man who once tried to disappear into the silence of these mountains. And now, no matter how heavy it felt, Daniel understood he could not turn away. By morning the storm had only grown worse. Snow swept across the valley like a white curtain, erasing the road until it seemed the cabin floated in a sea of ice. Daniel poured fresh coffee into enamel mugs, trying to quiet the unease gnawing at him. Ash and Willow stirred by the fire, their ears twitching, their instincts sharp. They sensed something before he did. Then, faint but unmistakable, came the grind of tires on frozen gravel. Headlights carved through the storm, weak as candle flames in the whiteout. Daniel stiffened, his mug rattling against the table. The Bobcats rose together, their muscles coiled, eyes fixed on the door. The knock never came. Instead, the door blew inward with the wind, and Sheriff Blake stepped inside, his coat dusted with snow, his boots heavy on the worn floorboards. Behind him followed Marlene, Mason's longtime friend, bundled in a thick coat, her cheeks red from the cold, her eyes full of something between worry and determination. "Well?" Blake said, stomping his boots, his gaze sweeping the cabin. "Quite the gathering." His eyes landed on Daniel, hard as stone. "Didn't expect you'd let yourself be found." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't. They came to me." Ash and Willow moved closer, their bodies forming a wall between Daniel and the intruders. Their fur bristled, but they made no sound, just a low, steady presence, ready to defend him. Marlene's voice trembled as she stepped forward. "Daniel, I'm not here to take anything from you. But Mason trusted me too. He told me if anything happened, I had to make sure they were safe." Her eyes flicked to the Bobcats, then back to him. "And safety doesn't look like a cabin with no permits, no protection." Blake cut her off, his tone sharp. "This isn't just about feelings. 2 wildcats in a house. One slip, one scratch, and the county will bury us in lawsuits. You know it, Doc," he said, turning to Claire. "You're the vet. You understand the risk." Claire held his gaze. "I understand the risk, but I also understand promises." Mason's was clear. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ash growled low, Willow's tail lashed once, firelight sparking in their eyes. They weren't attacking yet, but they were ready. Blake's hand hovered near his holster. One wrong move, Daniel thought, and the storm outside would seem gentle compared to what would happen here. The storm raged through the night, battering the cabin with fists of wind and waves of snow that buried fences, trees, even the dirt road leading back to town. Yet inside, the fire held steady, glowing warm and defiant against the storm's fury. Daniel sat slumped in the chair, Ash curled at his feet, Willow pressed against his knee. Their steady breathing calmed him, though his chest still heaved with the weight of the confrontation. Sheriff Blake's words lingered, sharp as knives, but so did Mason's memory, just as sharp, just as enduring. When dawn finally broke, the storm had vanished as suddenly as it had come. The world outside was silent, blanketed in snow so pure it hurt to look at. Smoke drifted from the cabin chimney, curling into a sky washed pale blue. For the first time in years, Daniel felt the morning didn't arrive with dread pressing on his chest. Instead, there was space, a fragile quiet that he hadn't known since Mason's death. He moved slowly to the hearth where Ash and Willow rested, their collars still fastened around their strong necks. His fingers brushed against the cracked leather, and he remembered Mason's hands, calloused from years of carving, working in the glow of lamplight. Mason hadn't left wealth, land, or letters in a lawyer's office. He had left something more enduring, pressed into the hides of the animals he loved, where no storm or law could erase it. Daniel unbuckled Willow's collar with trembling fingers. The leather was stiff, darkened from years of use. But as he turned it over, the firelight caught faint grooves hidden on the inside. His breath caught. There were words Mason had carved faintly, so faintly they had been buried under time and wear. Claire leaned forward, eyes wide. "There's more," she whispered. Daniel traced the letters, his thumb brushing them into view. His voice cracked as he read aloud, barely more than a whisper. "Family is where love is kept alive." The cabin fell into silence. Even the fire seemed to pause. His chest tightened, and tears blurred his vision. He realized Mason had known him better than anyone. Mason knew Daniel would retreat, wall himself off, try to live alone with his silence. And so, Mason had left a message not for the world, not for a court, but for Daniel alone, for the moment he would need it most. Ash pressed his forehead to Daniel's chest, Willow curling against his arm, sealing the vow without words. Daniel closed his eyes and let the tears fall, not from weakness but from the release of years of weight. "They're mine now," he whispered hoarsely. "Not because Mason told me so, but because they've chosen. And I'll keep them safe. I'll keep his love alive." Claire smiled through her tears. That's all Mason ever wanted. The day wore on slowly. The valley hushed under its white shroud. Sheriff Blake didn't return, and Marlene, true to her promise, left soup on the porch without knocking. No threats, no demands. Just quiet. When it came time to leave, Claire and Daniel stood on the porch. Ash and Willow flanked him like sentinels, their bodies radiating warmth in the cold morning air. Daniel raised a hand. Not a wave, not a farewell, but a vow between him and the life Mason had left behind. Back at the shelter, Claire updated the records with one final line. "Released into care of Daniel Hart, as per Mason's wish. Status, home." That night, Daniel sat by his kitchen window, coffee cooling in his hands, staring out at the stars shimmering above the snow. Mason's words echoed in his mind, carved into leather, carved into memory. Family is where love is kept alive. And for the first time since Mason's death, Daniel believed it. Somewhere up in the mountains, by a cabin fire, two bobcats purred into the night. Home, chosen and whole.